Their business meeting, I think they did it in 20, 30 minutes. So we're using that model. If you were a member, you got a packet and an email with all the details. But we'll have a little refresher, but we're not going to go through the whole thing. Okay, let me talk my way through. I would like to also say the reason we're going so quickly is we have a wonderful guest speaker, Adam Dickson, and we really want to give him as much time as we can. So I'm going to go through our first stuff. You've heard this before if you've been here before. Who are we? Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. Whoa. Our vision is a democracy. Wait, why isn't that coming up? Is it here?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Our vision is a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. We believe in the power of women and men to create a more perfect democracy. We are fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, our work, we are nonpartisan. The League does not support or oppose candidates or parties. As individuals, you are free to do any of that. The League does act on issues in its study based on its basic principles. Some of the actions we might take are educating people about voting and issues, advocacy related to our mission and positions, and litigation, not our local league, but the state and the national are frequently parts of lawsuits. Some housekeeping things. We live stream our meetings on Facebook and then post them to YouTube. We have this up front, so I don't think your faces will be seen, but people would be able to hear your voice. The camera is focused just on the speakers. Please help yourself to refreshments. Restrooms are in the far back behind the wall. Feel free to take home pens. We have pens with our name on them and vote buttons. There are a lot more materials at the registration table, including membership forms. If you're not a member, we would love to have you as one. So we are happy to have you here today. Okay, let the business begin. So our agenda, I'll call this to order right now. We're not going to do a formal roll call. I'm going to ask our membership person, Linda, if we have a quorum.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First, I'm going to give a very quick report of last year's activities, and then we'll go through all the things that need action very quickly, passing off the microphone so we can get to Adam. So a review. We grew from 63 to 84 members in the last year. And we grew from 250 newsletter subscribers to 480. So those are people who aren't members, but they often come to meetings and do things. So we did the candidate forums for Johnson City Board of Education and Johnson City Commission. That's with collaborations with we had the Langston Centre and the Science Hill and the newspaper and WJHL-TV. Is that right? Candace's nodding. We did the forum on the Johnson City Charter Amendments. That's something that nobody quite knew what's happening, and they thought they did. We have monthly educational meetings, now live streamed on Facebook. Fall, we talked about voting. The spring was on advocacy. Our monthly lunch with the League is now going to 4 different counties, and at one time we had 25 people show up. So those are a fun way to get to know people. We expanded our Vote 411 program. That's how you get your candidate guides from 1 county to 2. We increased our outreach. We bought festival tents and all the things you need to go with that. We had tents at 3 festivals, and every time we had kids voting for their favorite superhero and ice cream, and we had selfies with Susie Suffragist. We went to 4 parades with Susie and had Vote 411 banners, presentations to lots of different groups and other tabling opportunities. The Observer Corps visited 7 of our 8 county election committee meetings, 33 visits. 6 to 8 people regularly participated in the Tennessee League advocacy meetings. We decorated a tree for Johnson City Candyland, and we have a new website just launched like yesterday. You can just go to LWV-NETN.org, and it's still being tweaked, but it's new and it's easier to do. And last year, our league board members and friends put in nearly 3,000 volunteer hours. So I think that's tremendous. Okay, so we're moving to the business meeting. Only members can vote. Last year that they made the new lunch with the league, the festivals, and the civics fee.
Oh, I'll do it.
Oh, well, this is the last part. And members voted to accept changes in bylaws, the slate, the budget, and the priorities for the coming year. So, someone move to approve.
So moved.
Good. Second? Good. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good. Now Becky Keeler will talk about the bylaw.
Hi there. So this year we are making 2 sets of bylaws changes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So we decided to propose adding a second vice president because this league's activities and membership and so on has grown so much that it's just too much for 2 people to manage that. So that's what this is all about. And then the second one is a little complicated, but I'm going to make it super easy. And that is that we are, we're really focused this past year on potentials for conflicts of interest and partisan activities. And so we wrote some bylaws to constrain ourselves and let everybody among us know what's expected with regard to partisan and conflict activities. You know, things that in conflict with your duties with the board and with the league. And then, okay, so I guess I can explain the vote. I didn't explain the vote. Before we go and approve that, there's one other thing here. 2 vice presidents, procedure, and political activities. Okay, so now I would like to ask for a motion to approve these bylaws changes, which hopefully some of you have looked at in your packages. All in favor? Aye. Okay, approved. Next, we're going to hear from Kathy Benedetto, who is the chairperson of the nominating committee, to report on the new officers.
So, we started thinking about the officers for this year. We met our nominating committee and board met, put our slate together by about March. And I'm telling you that because I want anyone in the room who thinks they might be interested in serving on the board or assuming a leadership role with the league, please let us know. Let anyone on the board know, let the nominating committee know that we'd love to have you. It's certainly not a closed group. With that said, thank you to the people who helped put this slate together, and a great big thank you to the people who agreed to serve. It's a lot of work and important work. So for the next year, the term beginning in July of 2025, President-elect would be Candace Tanner. She would be our president. First Vice President, Ramsey McGowan, who's already serving. Second Vice President, Christina Runciman, who would be new to the board. Treasurer, Noelle Marshall, who has been a former treasurer. Secretary, Dave Bulrith. And you see the list of directors. Those that are highlighted are new terms. So Joy Fulkerson would be her second term. Ruth Crawford would be her first term on the board. Gwen, she'd serve as former president. Julie Thompson, and Lynn Johnson. So having said that, do we have any nominations from the floor? Okay.
Should we have the candidates stand up so people can see who they are?
I'm sorry?
Could we have the candidates stand up?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm Julia Thompson.
I'm Lynn Johnson.
Christina Runciman.
Ruth Crawford.
Joy Dickerson.
And when? Okay. So,
The next slide is the nominating committee,
oh, yeah, thank you.
because we might as well do all at once.
Yeah, sure. Nominating committee for next year would be Frankie Wolf, chair, myself, and Diana Mosen. Our budget committee would be Ruth Crawford, chair, and Linda Harris is serving on that committee. These are one-year terms. So now, do we have any nominations from the floor? Okay. Move to approve.
So moved.
Okay, second. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Any nays? Okay, well, thank you all. We've got a great new group of officers.
So before we get into the financial report, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I thought it might be interesting to give you a little idea of how we're funded and where your monies go. But before that, we have something that
something
Becky wants to do.
special.
It takes more time, so we want to get to our main program.
I'm back. So I wanted to do something a little off the agenda because it's a surprise, sort of, kind of. We want to honor Gwen for her service with the Hero Award this year. And we have a statement to share with you. We want to take a moment to recognize Gwen Menetol, who has served tirelessly as our president for the past 2 years. This League Hero Award is presented by the board to the member of the league who has contributed greatly to our league's success. There's no doubt that Gwen deserves this recognition. Gwen took the reins as president of this League of Women Voters of Tennessee in 2023 from the capable hands of our past president, Joy Fulkerson, who's sitting way back there. Say hi, Joy. Thank you. All right. Now where am I? So she's been involved in the league from the beginning, being a part of its reorganization and revival in 2019. What a year to start. She served as vice president for 2 terms before becoming president and has demonstrated unflagging commitment to our chapter, to the league mission, and to keeping us growing. She never limited her activities to her specified duties, but instead went far above and beyond the call of duty in innumerable ways. Under Gwen's leadership, we not only continued our established activities like monthly educational programs and twice-a-month newsletter, but we added significant activities, as you heard in her report a few minutes ago. Gwen's leadership demonstrates the essential characteristics of servant leadership. She's prioritized people, focusing on their well-being, growth, and success. She empowers individuals to take initiative, make decisions, and contribute to the organization's success. And she's a first-class collaborator, fostering a culture of teamwork, encouraging open communication, and shared problem solving. We have a statement from Debbie Gould, President of the League of Women Voters of Tennessee, who offers these remarks. To say that Gwen is a remarkable woman will not surprise anyone in this room. I've enjoyed hearing all of her reports of activities, both large and small, and they always generate an identical level of enthusiasm from her. Sound familiar? Sometimes our more established leagues get stuck in a rut and give up trying out new ideas. I'm so glad that the Northeast League, under Gwen's leadership, is willing to give anything a try. Thank you, Gwen, for your passion and your leadership. We know you are passing the torch to capable hands, ready to build on your successes. Signed, Debbie Gould, President, League of Women Voters of Tennessee. In essence, Gwen has emphasized service, empathy, and empowerment for our league. Gwen's leadership style will continue to have an impact on our league well beyond her tenure. I'm almost over. Gwen, we deeply appreciate the skills and energy you've brought to your presidency, and we are thrilled that you will remain on the board as we move forward. And now, here.
There it is.
I should have called you up to begin with. Sorry. There's your cord.
It has been a pleasure, an honor, and as you heard, I'm not going anywhere. So I'm very pleased with the slate, with who's going to be taking over, and I will be there in the middle, even if I shouldn't be. Thank you.
And one more word of recognition. I'm not sure that they're all here today. Allison Calvi, stand as I call your name if you're here. Linda Harris, Becky Keeler, and Laura Lose. We would like to recognize those who are rotating off the board, but it can't be said enough. Listen, from the compelling graphics for some of our programs, to the smiling face you see at the door, to the inspiring quotes, those are all visible contributions these people have made to the board. But I personally, this was my really first year on there. Their willingness to step outside their comfort zone and to give it all for whatever made the league a better place to be. I just can't thank you guys enough. So let's have a round of applause for them. So some of you may or may not realize that this last year we went to a new platform called Chapter Spot. Had a lot of headaches, but the one good thing about it that I saw is that the local league, more money of the fees, the dues that you pay each year come to the local league. So last year we had about 12% of your dues going to the local league. This year it was 20%. Just to give you an idea, $75 is a recommended contribution at the national level. And there was some concern across the state that some people might choose to give less. I have to say 100% of you guys gave at least $75 or more, and that's much appreciated. What it means as far as the renewal fees for our local league, for each one of those renewals we get about $13.61. So that's pretty much, the rest of it goes to state and national. But it's a good distribution list of the membership dues. So donations, and yes, I'll make a plea, there's a basket in the back if you'd like to contribute, but we have, besides dues, there's donations. And a lot of you guys have gone above and beyond to give both tax deductible, which go to our education fund held in Nashville, or to just the regular list of 501c4, which is not tax deductible. But you guys, that's a major part of our funding for the year. This last year, we received the Bob Owens Community Leadership Fund. They're trying to spread the wealth around. I said, but we do plan on reaching out to more of those civic organizations to try to look for funding there. So that's pretty much, I said, if you guys would like to contribute above and beyond your membership dues, we're willing to take your money, and it goes to a good cause, which is really my last slide, and then we'll move on to the good stuff. Educational programs, they are first class. It's recognized at the state level. Programs that we do here in Northeast Tennessee are some of the best in the state. People are always looking for those ideas. The meetings and travel, of course, having this wonderful facility here at Food City is a major portion, major expense. It was categorized under meetings, but let's say that's the way the bookkeeping goes. So that represents, let's say about almost half of our, let's say, as far as the expense of our league. The outreach program, and I gotta do, even though Bob Warner's not here, I gotta put a plug in. The outreach program has ramped up. We've got other members on the outreach team here today. Can't say enough about those guys, but they really need you guys to volunteer. Just a few hours here and there. Let's say just a few hours here and there, let's say whether it be a parade, we've got some upcoming, let's say, events, but let's say on this part, let's say the outreach is almost 20% of our budget, and hopefully next year it'll be even more on this one. So this is where your money goes. We do hope to have a media intern. As you can see from me, I'm a certain demographic. I have to ask my grandkids how to use Instagram and some of the other stuff. But we want to change that demographic and reach those people that we need to educate and empower those voters. So we're hoping to find a media intern, for this next year. So you may see a little bit more pizzazzy on our social media sites with that, because it certainly isn't me, that's for sure. And so honestly, you already got in your packet, the details that pretty much I've summarized as far as the budget. I do want to say thank you to Dave Bolrath and Bruce Crawford, my budget planning committee, for their oversight on this. But I think at this point we need to take a vote to approve. Do I have a move from the floor to approve, the budget for this next year?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, so Sharon Brown, I'm going to transfer this over to you. So Sharon is also from Kingsport, just like me, and like I said, she is representing the outreach team today.
I didn't know I was representing the outreach team, but I want to present our next year's priorities, and education is top of the list. And we do this by working through education on making democracy work through monthly educational programs. And as Candace said, these programs are absolutely excellent. Ramsey and her team have done a fabulous job. And Adam Dickson being here today is an example of an outstanding speaker. We do outreach through media, festivals, tabling, and public speaking. I can attest to the tabling at the Blue Plum, and several of you all helped, and you know how people were just eager to get information about how to contact our Congress people, our legislators, and I think that's one of the most important things that we do, is to let people know how they can be active. Growing our league through membership and volunteer opportunities, and expanding our reach to other counties through Observer Corps, which Dave is big on Observer Corps presentations and lunches with the league. And we have a lunches with the league on Wednesday, so if anybody wants to go, they can RSVP to Linda today. We would love to have you join us. So I think that's a wonderful way of getting to know each other and all of that. So quickly, that's it.
Is there a vote to approve the league priorities for this year?
Oh, we voted on it? Yeah.
Okay. Moved by Candace.
Second by
Second.
Okay.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. To the next slide.
I am quite honored
to introduce Adam Dickson. If Ramsey hadn't been here today, I wouldn't have gotten to do this, so I'm glad she's on vacation. Everybody needs vacation. This entire year, and kudos once again to the program committee, Ramsey Gowan, Dave Allred, and Becky Keeler, for some absolutely phenomenal programs we've had this year in an election year to address our mission around empowering voters and defending democracy. And I think by the end of this year, we all can celebrate that. I think we know a lot more about that than we did this time last year. Kudos to all of you. It is my great honor to be able to introduce Adam Dickson. Adam is a community advocate and a servant leader. His professional experiences are wide-ranging, from local government to higher ed to the nonprofit sector. He currently works for the city of Johnson City, and I think it's sort of a miracle for those of us who've been able to watch what has happened from the beginning of the Langston Centre to the true multicultural engagement center that we have now. And Adam built that and is managing with the team. Adam would be highly offended if I ever gave him credit for anything, so I'll always add for a team. But I think any of us who in our wildest imagination could not envision the Langston Centre becoming the kind of center, not just for Johnson City, but for this whole part of Tennessee that it is right now. And that was Adam Dickson's leadership. He's vice mayor and on the board of mayor and alderman of my hometown, Jonesboro. And he's also an adjunct instructor of political science at East Tennessee State University. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Carson Newman, and he has a master's of public administration from East Tennessee State University. And he was, 2 years ago, selected to be part of the highly prestigious, and he graduated from the highly prestigious Leadership Tennessee. Now, I called Adam and fussed at him about this resume because I thought that is so wimpy, because I know all the things, I know maybe half of all the things he does. I know, produces incredible film on Blacks in Appalachian within the last couple of years, all kinds of creative projects like that. I know that he serves on at least 3 boards, and he founded the Jonesboro Community Chest in East Tennessee and this whole part of the world. And when I asked him about that and called him to task, he said, "Oh, just say what you want." So here comes what I want to say. Adam probably knows more about Blacks in Appalachia than anybody that I'm aware of, and that's not my opinion. I've heard it from a number of other people. He's a mentor. He is my person to go to when I don't know what to do next, and for a lot of us, he's been a mentor and continues to be. He's also a wise sage. He will give advice very carefully, but you better know that he's thought through it very carefully, and the greater good is going to be taken care of with anything he recommends. I don't think I've ever heard him say an unkind word about anybody, even people who deserve to have unkind words said about him. He knows a lot of people. He's very slow to share all that he knows unless you ask him a question, and I cease to be amazed when asked a question how much Adam has to share. For me, he's one of those miraculous people in our community who makes community work the way that he should. I have as much respect for Adam Dickson as anyone I know, and I know him as my community leader. I know him because I've served on boards with him. I know him because of all the things that he's been responsible for initiating. But mostly what I know about him is he's truly one of the best human beings that I've ever known. And I think those of you who know Adam Dickson probably would say the same thing. He's an expert, and we're very fortunate to have him talk with us because he knows how to talk to us about Black American political behavior. Thank you, Adam, very much for being with us.
Good afternoon to everybody. I hope everybody's well today. I thank you so much for the invitation. I am humbled to be here to interact with the League of Women Voters. Glad to see old friends and over just a little bit. Okay. Good to see everybody via Zoom and YouTube. I hope that you're well. I'm looking at you. And glad to see everyone here today. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have good memories. I was thinking Miss Zella Manier. I don't know if people remember that name or not, but going back in time just a little bit, hairdresser here in Johnson City, and was at one time president of the League of Women Voters. And so early 2000s, I was getting my start in this space and with the NAACP. And we thought that it was important that organizations of like mind interact, collaborate. And so we did a few community forums. League of Women Voters, NAACP, and then Linda Modica was over the Sierra Club at the time. And so we all worked together and really became good friends. So it's good to interact one more time with the League of Women Voters. Linda Harris, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very, very appreciative. Not everybody would agree with you, but I appreciate you for saying that. It's awfully kind. And Gwen, thank you. Good to see again so many wonderful folks. I hope I meet your standards today. You all talked a good game. Let's hope that I can meet the standards today as we talk about Black political thought. And I was given some responsibilities, and I hope that I can meet those responsibilities today. We want to provide a historical overview of Black political thought. We want to assess politics or Black politics after the Civil Rights Movement. Try to give an overview there. And then describe Black politics in Northeast Tennessee, which I'm very honored to do and eager to do here in the next second or so. Look forward to your questions and look forward to a dialogue. The question should be asked, why do Black people, Black America, and I hope that nobody is offended or unsettled or uncomfortable by my use of the adjective. We'll use that adjective quite a bit, all right? But why is it that politics is so important to Black people? Okay? And so when we think about the United States and different groups, now a lot of people don't usually think in this kind of balkanized approach. But one would argue that probably in the last 60 years we have become a society where we have different constituencies. Think Indian American, Chinese American, Japanese, Vietnamese. Think Arabic, right? Jewish. At one time, maybe late 19th, early 20th century, it was just Italian and Irish. So think in that frame of mind. When you think about these various constituencies, one thing might be common, and I hope that again, if you think that I'm being stereotypical or being out of line, as Brene Brown says, call me in, don't call me out. But when you think about these respective constituencies, they are economically driven. There is an economic agenda. Okay? And so when we think about even Irish and Italian, and again, other constituencies I just mentioned, we see where there is an emphasis and investment economically, and we see where these groups have grown and evolved. And many times, the conclusion is that they pull themselves up. And so why can't black people do the same exact thing? The question now has to be asked, why do black people pursue politics? So I need you to be thinking in that frame of mind. One way that I like to try to characterize the answer to this question is based off of Plato's The Republic. In Plato's Republic, he talks about the Greek city-state, and he talks about the fact that there's a space where people gather. And they gather and they share ideas. They talk, they may gossip a little, but they still interact. And it's called the agora. It's the marketplace. And because of the marketplace, he says that it's very important for this particular place to exist within the Greek city-state. One could argue that when you look at the United States, that there would be a central place in every community where people would gather and share ideas and make, whether it be their town, their city, their county, their state, or the country, stronger. I'm talking about whether we call it the town hall, the city hall, the county courthouse, the state legislature, or the U.S. Congress. At one point in time, we used to say that the United States would be a nation of laws. We don't use that kind of talk anymore, but we used to say that the United States would be a nation of laws. And so there are these spaces where we gather to deal. I believe I'm talking with some confidence because if you go to New England, there are these spaces, they're town hall meetings. All right? There are spaces, dedicated spaces where people can gather. So why do black people pursue politics? Well, if we think about it, I like to use an Appalachian term. In the early 1600s, 1608, white folks are going to come to the New World, or at least 1608, folks are going to come to Jamestown. Right? 1619, first 20 Africans are going to come to Jamestown. In a way, we could say they're kind of like country cousins. Black folks and white folks. Here, together. And when about a little more than 100 folks gather in the 1780s to shape the country or reshape the country, because the Articles of Confederation weren't going the way that they should have been, you had a brother by the name of Benjamin Banneker. Mr. Banneker wanted to be at the Constitutional Convention. He actually wrote Thomas Jefferson to try to get somebody on his side to say, we should be there. Black folks should be there. Mr. Jefferson responded. It was a friendly response, but still very paternalistic. Essentially saying that, again, folks of African descent didn't really have the mental capacity to be at such a gathering as the Constitutional Convention. So when we go back to this fundamental question, why do black people pursue politics? I would contend to you today because it is a fundamental part of our society, the marketplace of ideas, and the fact that since black people have been here, as long as their white counterparts, there is a desire to participate in the foundational fabric of the nation. There's also something to be said when we think about the idea of how race and policy will align itself. And so in my class, I try to spend a little bit of time in talking about how this nexus will come about. And I know that I'm limited on time. I appreciate you all working so expeditiously through the meeting. But I do talk about the fact that when we, some people, when we have these conversations, sometimes the jaws get a little tight. I hope that won't be the case today. But sometimes jaws get a little tight and we tend to really want to think this thing through a little bit. And so, did everybody come here as slaves? No. What about indentured servants? So let's kind of quickly deal with that. There was a period of time when we would have had indentured servanthood. Okay? One person one time characterized to me that folks in Ireland, they were the black people of the British Empire. And so a lot of Irish individuals came to the United States as indentured servants. They would work for a period of time and they would pay off that loan. All right? So a period of years. But we know that in 1619, 20 Africans came here as slaves. And so there was this type of working, let's say secondary citizenship. Let's use that kind of language. Okay? For a period of time in the 1600s, you would have had Irish people and African people associating together. All right? One as indentured servant, one as slaves. And then we'll get to the 1660s, and there's something that's noticed by the time we get to the 1660s, and it's this thing called miscegenation. In today's time, we call it interracial relationships. But in this particular period, it's called miscegenation. You'll begin to see where people are married. You'll also see a dynamic by the 1660s where you have, again, British colonies. You'll have a situation where British landowners have relations with their enslaved. Offspring is produced, and then when the British landowner dies, based on British law, there's an inheritance for the child. And that child, now we call biracial. Ultimately, we will see that person as black, but that child now has an inheritance. And we'll see where colonial legislatures now have to respond to this dynamic. And then we'll see by like 1667, 1668, where Maryland and Georgia and Virginia will pass legislation legalizing the institution of slavery. Because now we're seeing a dynamic where a lot of British men are having relations with their enslaved. We'll see situations where a lot of African men are marrying Irish women. And now it seems like it's a little bit of an issue. And so now when we see race and policy, we see now where the law is used, right, to systemically, in a sense, downcast one group at the expense of another. So now we see the implementation of the social construct of race. Go back to the fundamental question. Why do black people pursue politics? Because, again, it is through policy a group of people have been labeled. And it is until we see policy change that group of people are labeled. I hope I don't have to share today that black is not determinant on melanin. Black is not determinant based on whether I have basketball skills or football skills. Black is not determinant whether I can dance. All right? Because I promise you I can. Black is not determinant based on a certain kind of language. All right? Black has absolutely nothing to do with that. Black is a socio-political label that is attached to people. White is a socio-political label that is attached to people. All right? It has no biological root whatsoever. Right? And so now, why do black people pursue politics? Because they see the nexus between race and policy. And this label is now affixed to a group of people in the society. And so we realize that it's through the policy change that we have to see some kind of action taken or some kind of determinant taken to address the policy. Mr. Banneker understood that. Mr. Banneker understood that, and as this group of men are gathering in the 1780s to deal with the Constitution or to deal with the government, and they are crafting the Constitution, he wanted to be in the mix. And it's kind of interesting, again, he didn't get there, and I think that is something when you look at the document. The document is a strong document. It's the envy of the world. It's a wonder the way that the document would be put together. If you think about it, up until that time, monarchy is the way, right? It's really the prevailing way of governance. And there's this notion that it's one person, and that God had ordained that person, that one family. And that's going to be the prevailing notion for the longest time. And so now we get individuals coming together actually thinking that we could put together a document, and this document where citizens could come together and elect somebody to be the president. Citizens could come together and could form a House of Representatives and a Senate bicameral legislature. Citizens would come together and would obey the rule of law. I think it's outstanding. But our founders did this thing called compromise. They did this thing called compromise. And so as you have folks from the American South that have really gotten attached to a money-making engine, right? And they are growing in extreme wealth, opulence to some degree. Folks from the South really have considerations and concerns about the government that is about to be formed. And so can we have a House of Representatives that's going to be based on proportion, or excuse me, it's going to be based on population, excuse me, it's going to be based on population. Can we really have a House that will be equitable if the northern states have more population than the southern states? Can that really work? And so there's going to be a heavy conversation. And so the founders, they're going to deal with the peculiar institution. They're going to actually make some decisions regarding the peculiar institution. If you've ever looked at the document, I encourage you to go back to look at sections 2 and 9 and 4. All right? When we look at, for example, section 2, we're going to deal with what's called the 3/5 compromise. Right? So out of five black men at this time, 3 of the 5 will count as one person. All right? It's identified in the document. When we get to the 9th, section 9 of the Constitution, the slave trade will end by 1808. And we know for a fact that that did not happen, but that's what the Constitution said. Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution, the guiding document of the land, will deal with a fugitive slave law. So if I live in Georgia and I escape to freedom and get to Ohio and caught, the federal Constitution says that I am to be sent back to Georgia. The guiding document of the land deals with the concept of slavery. Now, why is this important? Because again, we now see the nexus, at least I hope we do, the nexus between race and policy. Very important when we have conversations about systemic racism. Historically, our conversations about racism have been rooted in hatred. So I don't like white people, or white people don't like me. And so then we try to figure out, well, how, in the words of Rodney King, how can we all just get along? And then, we sit together, we eat together, we laugh together, we cry together, and we feel like that we've built bonds and we're getting along with each other. But then sometimes there are these things called systems, institutions. And sometimes we don't want to have conversations about the institutions that guide our society. The Founding Fathers dealt with this. And again, black people understood that the guiding documents of the land will have language in them that is on its face discriminatory. Now, one would argue, well, didn't we do something about that from 1861 to 1865? Didn't we do something about that? And didn't we create the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendments, right? So we ended slavery, we declared that slaves are now citizens, and then we also extend the right to vote. So didn't that happen? Isn't that a positive thing? And didn't we do this wonderful thing from 1865 to 1877? Boy, this thing called Reconstruction. Well, isn't that something? Because we're going to totally reconstruct the country. And one day you're a slave, and the next day you can be a lawyer, you can be a judge. Yeah, we did. And it was 12 wonderful years if you were black. It was hell on earth if you were not black. Particularly if you lived in the states of the former Confederacy. And particularly if you were a Confederate sympathizer. And you would work very hard if you fell into that category to change the way things were. And so we see by 1877 the end of Reconstruction. And then we'll see the implementation of what's called black codes. And a slow rescission of all the rights and all the opportunities, so that by 1896 we have a Supreme Court case. And that Supreme Court case will guide a generation, actually more than a generation, it'll guide for about 69 years. All right? And so Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. So 12 years of a multiracial democracy, but again, almost 70 years of Jim Crow. Right? So why do black people again pursue politics? It's that notion that within the political realm or in this realm of policy, the livelihood of black people exists. Okay, so again, we see where the guiding document of the country in these articles of the Constitution deal with slavery and really set the stage, the peculiar institution, and set the stage for what we now know as race. So as black people, black folks have a few ways of responding to this reality. 3 forms of black political expression. All right? And we'll talk about those here in just a couple of seconds. One will be forced revolution. Secondly will be what I refer to as the FUBU concept. Some people know what I'm talking about. And then thirdly is political action. All right? When we think about forced revolution, it is just that. All right? Gentleman here on the far left is Dr. Henry Highland Garnet. In the 1850s, there will be a Negro convention. Frederick Douglass, who I like to label as the father of black America. I like to give him his respect. Mr. Douglass is at this Negro National Convention, and there's a fierce debate between Mr. Douglass and this gentleman here, Henry Highland Garnet, who was a Presbyterian minister and had strong feelings. We don't talk a lot about Henry Highland Garnet, but Mr. Garnet was very, very strong in his beliefs that the only way that black people will ever be able to move forward in American life is if they engage in revolt. And Mr. Henry Highland Garnet's notion was that what happened in the 1770s? What was 1776? Yes, ma'am. American Revolution. And then you begin to think about it, folks got mad because they were getting taxed to death. I mean, and I say that, somewhat jokingly. But yes, I mean, folks were getting taxed out the wazoo, and they got mad, tried to work it out, couldn't work it out. King George said, no, it ain't going to happen. And so folks got mad and revolted. Henry Highland Garnet says that the only way that black people are ever going to get the respect that they deserve is if they revolt. Right? It is they revolt. A couple other images that I have there. The one in the middle would be a drawing that would come about as a result of Nat Turner. And I'm sure we all know the raids in Virginia in the 1850s. Nat Turner would go from community to community. And some of us that were raised in the South, there's a tradition. We probably recognize it and don't even pay attention to it. Somebody pulls up in our driveway and we may look out the front door, may even step out on the front porch to greet whoever pulls up. I know I saw it more than one time growing up, and I do it to this day. If somebody pulls up in the driveway, who is that? And you step out. Back in the 1850s, it'd be very customary if you heard the horses coming to your plantation that you might step out to greet the individual. And Nat Turner had a group with him, and they had weapons, and as the individuals would step out, he and the team would commit murder. And Nat Turner firmly believed that God had called him to do that. The other image that I have is of the Stono Rebellion back in the 1830s in South Carolina. A group of slaves would revolt, and they would march throughout different communities in South Carolina. For British North America, this was the most serious effort, or the most serious act of violence that had occurred, at least for that point in time. And it kindly sets the stage when you think about Stono, and then you think about as the American Republic is formed in the 1780s, and we get to like the turn of the century and 19th century. There's going to be a situation in an area known as Hispaniola, current day Haiti. A fellow by the name of Toussaint Louverture is going to lead a rebellion. There are some accounts that the founders of this new republic are actually thinking about a civil rights bill as early as the late 1790s, early 1800s. And then the word comes out about Haiti. And it kind of scares some folks. And so now, again, we begin to see this nexus, this fusion between race and policy. The forced revolution is one way that black folks have thought about trying to move forward. Secondly is the FUBU concept, for us, by us. There was a fashion line back in the 90s known as FUBU. And how many have seen this new film, Sinners? We got some. Okay, just a couple. Okay. So anyway, there's this new film out now, Sinners. The brothers, he's become a multi-millionaire, literally. Kugler did this film. And in the film, there's an actual scene where there's a slight homage to For Us, By Us. You'll miss it if you don't pay any attention to it. But anyway, For Us, By Us. Okay? And this is where black folks are going to say, you know what, if we're not wanted, fine, we'll just handle our own business. And we'll just work among ourselves. For sake of time, because again, I'd love to hear your input, but I will say, I kind of feel like that this is where right now Black America is going. Very willingly, voluntarily, as the country is really going through this pendulum shift. If you think about 1965 to, frankly, 2016, the pendulum swung one way. Even with the slow rescission of rights from, and I'm talking to a nonpartisan organization, so I won't get partisan. But when you see the slow rescission of rights and opportunities, still the pendulum swung one way. There was still an upholding of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. There was still an upholding of that. And now we've seen a pendulum shift, a dramatic pendulum shift in real time. And frankly, there are many Americans that I think that they have concluded that never in their lives would they see that dramatic pendulum shift. And so now there are black folks that have just made the conclusion, you know what, if we're not going to find, let's just stay in our community, let's just do our business, let's just do what we need to do. For us, by us. Some of the people that have characterized that, the person here on my left would be Richard Allen, Bishop Richard Allen, the founder of the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He is a Methodist. He goes to the Methodist Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to pray, and the bishop says, you are not welcome here at the altar. And after different instances of trying to go to the altar to pray, Absalom Jones, James Fortin, and Richard Allen will all play a role in founding the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which will start what you may have heard, the Black Church. And it's something when I'm in different environments and folks will say, well, there is no black church and there is no white church, it's just the church, and that is so true. But it is this thing called racism that would start the black church. Okay? And so Bishop Allen would have the theme to seek for ourselves. And that would become the guiding notion for the AME Church. Right? Another individual, there's Booker T. Washington. So by the late 19th century, he will emerge as the black leader, late 19th and early 20th century. And he will embrace this notion called accommodation. Accommodation was where essentially you were quiet on political issues, but you were very focused on economic issues. Mr. Washington in 1895 will speak to some folks in Atlanta, and he'll say, we ought to be as separate as the fingers on all things political, but as firm as the fist on all things that promote mutual progress. And thus becomes the Atlanta Compromise address, the idea of accommodation, that you're quiet on political issues, you're only focused on economic issues. And now just here very recently, we're beginning to see Mr. Washington was probably a little more focused on the political, but at this particular point in time, the thought was that he was the Uncle Tom. He's the sellout. But the other individual there, not Mr. Farrakhan, but Reverend Charles Octavius Booth, would embrace accommodation very strongly in the state of Alabama. And so essentially what you're going to see here is that you embrace the concept of segregation. And so if it is supposed to be separate but equal, well then how do we maximize the equal? Now in many cases we know it was separate and unequal. But you would have situations where in 19th and first half of the 20th century, where you would want to have a black middle class. And so there's, I won't do it today, but there's a whole lecture about the method behind the madness when you think about the Wizard of Tuskegee, as Booker T. Washington would be called. How do you maximize segregation? And so as you have these urban areas of the South, a Birmingham, a Nashville, a Memphis, all right? You have these urban nodes of the South that will have black communities. A lot of the teachers, a lot of certain key positions, job positions, folks would come out of Tuskegee University and they would go to these urban nodes. And so for even in segregated life, black people would thrive in these urban nodes. And so now when you look at today's society, and I mentioned earlier, a lot of black folks are voluntarily wanting to slip back into this FUBU concept. For us, by us. Why don't we just focus on the black economy? Why don't we just focus on black institutions? Why don't we just really just center ourselves in this black area? It's kind of the method behind the madness, because historically for the 20th century, we labeled Booker T. Washington and Uncle Tom. But now there's a lot of people that are getting very comfortable with this notion of black economics, black community development, really a shaping of the black community, particularly if there is this pendulum shift away from an integrated society to a type of neo-segregated society. And then there's Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan, current head of the Nation of Islam. When you talk about this for us, by us concept, I did include him in this. There is a section that I do in the class on black nationalism, to talk about black nationalism. And I thought for a second, somebody may ask the question, well, Dixon, you've got all men. Where are the women? In this particular vein, and we're talking about black political behavior, when we talk about this particular vein, it is very male-oriented. It is very male-oriented. And there's a deeper conversation there. But I think that when you think about the 2024 campaign, and some people are scratching their heads trying to figure out, well, why did black men go for President Trump? I just mentioned there is a growing notion right now in the black community that is rooted in this notion of for us, by us. Right? And there's a number of factors there that you could discuss, but I want to finish the presentation. Thirdly is political action. Right? And political action is broken up into two categories. One will be pressure politics, and the second will be electoral politics. Now, what has been palatable in American society when we think about political behavior among the black population is political action. Right? Political action. When we think about, for example, someone like a Mr. Douglas, as you see him there, when you think about Ida Wells Barnett, who is also here, pressure politics will be applied. Pressure politics. So Mr. Douglas will call Abraham Lincoln out, call him a bloodhound, call him all kinds of nasty words and terms for his actions in the Civil War. But then ultimately, as Mr. Lincoln is thinking about how to move this war forward, ultimately we'll have the Emancipation Proclamation, and it's Mr. Douglas who is pushing and applying pressure, and ultimately even saying black men need to fight in this war. And Mr. Douglas will have sons that will go to fight in the Civil War. Pressure politics. Mr. Douglas will do that. When you're talking about lynching taking place throughout the South in a very rampant way, it becomes very convenient. And Ida Wells will lead anti-lynching legislation. Right? Pressure politics. Think about the NAACP and different groups along that line. And then there's electoral politics. And of course, we know Barack Obama, the growth of the Congressional Black Caucus and such. And you have there Ms. Shirley Chisholm. But then you also have an individual there, Mr. Edward Brooke. And, Senator Brooke would serve in Massachusetts in the 1960s. He was a black Republican that served in the 1960s. And so back in the day when you could have liberal Republicans and you could have conservative Democrats, Edward Brooke was a Republican from Massachusetts. Right? And so we see here again these two strains of political action. Right? So, kind of a historical overview of black political thought and how black people have expressed themselves throughout the history of American society. When we think about black politics post-civil rights movement, and I'm trying to move through the timeline, so I'm making assumptions that everyone is with me. We know that 1955 to 1968 will be the civil rights years, right? We know that there will be a 26-year-old preacher from Atlanta, Georgia. He'll be in Montgomery, Alabama, and he will play a key role as the drum major for justice, right? We know that there's always going to be a little bit of trepidation because there were other individuals in the movement. You take, for example, Mr. E.D. Nixon, who was at that time, late 50s, early 60s, a strong, bold man, a Pullman porter, and kind of a brash man. He's leading the NAACP, and here comes this 26-year-old kind of scrawny preacher, and everybody wants to give him all the fanfare. But what about Mr. Dixon that had been involved in the effort for so long? And so there's going to be a little bit of tension, intra-racial tension. But we know 1955 to 1968 is the American Civil Rights Movement. And we know that the cause of the Civil Rights Movement, we will see the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and we'll see a whole host of legislation come through what's called the Great Society. I'm going to talk about the Great Society here in a second. Now, I got to admit to you, you're really going to see me walk out here in a second when I talk about the Great Society. And that was meant for you to chuckle, but that's okay. And so when we talk about black politics, post-civil rights movement, there are a number of organizations that come together, and they actually find their roots in the early 1900s. The strategy is to have a whole ecosystem, a black ecosystem of organizations that will come together to move and push for equal rights and justice. All right? So think NAACP. NAACP 1909, 1911, the Urban League. Urban League is the equal symbol. NAACP. By the 1950s, you'll have the Congress of Racial Equality and CORE. All right? By the mid-1950s, you'll have the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But the notion is to create an ecosystem of organizations, movement-oriented organizations, and they will apply pressure. Remember, one of the three forms of political expression there. And so Urban League, Whitney Young, Urban League is supposed to be a little more of a polished group. You have to understand, W.E.B. Du Bois, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, will form, or he will play a role in forming the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 1909, and it'll be part of what's called the Niagara Movement, right? And the idea is to apply pressure, advocate, right? And that there is a need for an organization to push the envelope and to hold elected people accountable. Thus the NAACP. Well, if you're Booker Washington said there's a need for an organization that could do direct service. There's this whole philosophical debate between Du Bois and Washington. I encourage you, if you haven't read The Souls of Black Folk, Mr. Washington has a whole chapter where he just eviscerates Booker Washington. But Booker Washington says, well, what good is it going to be if people have all these rights but they still live in Mississippi, and the best that they can do is still work in this kind of neo-slavery environment? And so Mr. Washington says there's a need to provide direct services to people where they are. And so thus he forms the Urban League. The Urban League would become more of a body that would be focused on urban America and would really link to the corporate sector. And so Whitney Young, we don't talk about Whitney Young too much anymore, but very, very instrumental figure when we think about the Civil Rights Movement. James Farmer, another individual, we talk about the Congress of Racial Equality, the Freedom Rides. Don't talk about him much anymore, but he would be a figure. And then you have Mr. Roy Wilkins. A lot of people don't remember Mr. Roy Wilkins, but he was executive secretary for the NAACP during this period of time. And quite candidly had his issues with Dr. King, because again, why is Dr. King becoming so out front? But Dr. King, to his credit, understood his role as the drum major for justice. And so Dr. King tried to work at one point with the NAACP about protests. And the NAACP at that particular point in time was not interested in protests. They had a strategy that they would work through legal means. And thus Thurgood Marshall and the Legal Defense Fund. And that strategy was really working. But Dr. King said that there was another way to move based on learning about Satyagraha and Mohandas Gandhi. And Mr. Wilkins wasn't really for that, but over time you would see where, again, this coalition would move forward. But then I have this woman here that's very important to note when we think about movement in the American Civil Rights Movement. This is Miss Ella Baker. Miss Ella Baker would take Dr. King to task on a few times. Dr. King was talking from a 3,000-foot level, talking to America. Miss Baker said there was a need to have boots on the ground actually organizing in communities. And so she had a problem with this idea of what we now call the messianic leader. Okay? And so as Dr. King is the drum major for justice, utilizing this new platform of the media, galvanizing black communities throughout the South to think about, again, your political destiny, there's going to be someone like a Ella Baker and then somebody like a Septima Clark that's going to say you're putting too much focus on him and you're not focused on boots on the ground. Well, so the strategy of the DEI ecosystem is going to come about and then we have April the 4th, 1968, and then the death of King. And so this model will guide 60 years post-civil rights movement. Organizations applying pressure, right? Moving those in authority to move for the greater good, or to move to the needs of the black community. But then there are some folks that are not paid attention to when we think about this period of the American Civil Rights Movement. And I promise you, I will not walk out, and I cannot walk out. So we have LBJ, and then we have Adam Clayton Powell. Let me try to get through here the remaining slides that I have. You also have the election of black mayors. And so we see post-civil rights movement, the election of black mayors. So we will see some positive movement. Don't have time to talk about it, but then you will see in this electoral vein of political action, you will see this great clash come about between these two figures. And another moment, another time, we'll talk about Jackson and Obama when we think about black political behavior that shapes today. When you think about black politics post-civil rights movement, it's also important to talk about Republicans and black Republicans. There's a few black Republicans now in Congress, and there's a unique history there that needs some coverage. From 1970, there was just a little more than 1,400 black elected officials, but now there's more than 10,000. And then when we think about black politics in Northeast Tennessee, a wide variety of individuals I wish I had the time to talk about. But then there are some challenges that face the black community and here locally, and challenges that we need to work through, but we have opportunity. And there's a need to engage in those opportunities. And so I've devoted my life for the past 2 decades to try to think through those opportunities. So that being said, I thank you for your time today, and I'll take any questions that you may have regarding black political behavior. Yes, sir.
What do you think are the primary challenges in Northeast Tennessee in terms of black politics? The major challenge.
So one issue is that we have 3 cities as opposed to 1. Okay, 3 cities, Tri-Cities, Bristol, Kingsport, and Johnson City. And so by having 3 cities that are kind of vying for that sense of dominance, you have black communities in each of those cities, and the fact that the black folks that make up those communities are products of those communities. So if you're blackened in Kingsport, there's a firm allegiance to Kingsport. Blackened in Bristol, there's a firm allegiance to Bristol. Blackened in Jonesboro, firm allegiance to Jonesboro. And it literally comes down, if there's an event in Kingsport, I don't know if I'm going. That's, and it's funny when you juxtapose what I just shared with folks that have moved into the area. They have no problem at all doing an event in Bristol, driving to Jonesboro for another event, and living in Elizabeth. It's no problem at all for them to make that drive because of where they come from. But for local people, it's the biggest struggle ever. So I say, first off, living in these 3 cities, we're dispersed, and there's no real way to build that kind of majority that we need to build. Sadly, when we think about black populations and black political movement, it is done in, it's based on numbers. And so there's a number of folks that really want to believe that, wait a second, I'm an individual, we live in America, America is individual us. What about seeing me for me? But the reality is that when we think about black people, we think about numbers. And so now that people are dispersed, it's hard to build numbers. The black population has to have a collectivist kind of mindset. So that dispersion is one issue. And then secondly, the lack of solidarity. There's all kinds of fiefdoms, and so there's very, very difficult to really talk about solidarity. And when you live in, say, 2024, 2025, there might be a very high testosterone. Right. Very high testosterone. And so at some point, when will someone embrace humility? Well, again, I want to be very careful, but in the larger scheme of things, humility is the last thing that you are going to embrace. It's either my way or no way at all, and I don't have to participate. So the lack of solidarity. And then lastly is political apathy. So I would label that as a third challenge. Black women nationally have checked out post-2024. There are a number of black women, if you listen to different commentators, pundits, they have checked out of the political process. Black women would have, particularly within the Democratic Party, would have been seen as the most loyal constituency. There's a whole history there of feminism and race and the clash. And I wish I had time to go into it, but those 3 elements is what I would say. Thank you. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I noticed at protests there are very few people of color. And I wonder if that is because of the concept you mentioned of for us, by us?
Could possibly be. For Northeast Tennessee Society, I would say that there is a mindset that we don't, so we live in the buckle of the Bible Belt. And for Northeast Tennessee Society, there is an attachment to Scripture. You need to respect those that have the rule over you. If at all possible, the Apostle Paul is talking, if at all possible, live peaceable among men. And in one context, this is a holdover from the period of the Civil Rights Movement, because in Northeast Tennessee, we did not see what folks saw in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, or West Tennessee. And for sake of time, and I won't delve too deeply into that, but on one level, not seeing what other southern states saw, it's kind of a whoo kind of feeling. You know, we didn't see that. And actually, you could work for Dr. So-and-so, you got paid well, Eastman comes, you could get on at Eastman even if it was cleaning. It still was a better job. It was paid and benefits and such. And so a lot of black folks historically have not had to delve so deeply in struggle. Then when you attach religion to that, and that you don't want to do something that's going to be sinful, you don't want to do something that's going to cast your pearls before swine, you don't want to do something that is obtuse, well then we'll pray and we'll let other folks do that. And so those are a few reactions for this area. I saw somebody back here, but then, okay, Alan.
Yeah, I was just curious, can you think of anything specific that we can do to overcome political apathy?
So, as white individuals, candidly, there are resources that white individuals have to invest in constructive black movement. Malcolm is going to say, when he forms the Organization of African American Unity, that white people could fund the work, but black people have to do the work. And there's going to be a struggle there, and again, for time's sake, I won't get too long-winded, but there's going to be a struggle throughout American history where we want to form the interracial coalitions, but then there will be a clash where there's a thought about how it should be done. And the NAACP would see this. When you go back to Ida Wells, there would be a white woman on the board, Mary White Overton, wealthy white woman. She sits on the board of the NAACP. And when people like Archibald Grimke would talk, or Du Bois would talk, or Monroe Trotter would talk, they could say that the sky is green and grass is blue, and Miss Mary White Overton would agree. When Ida Wells would talk, she would always have a question. No, that's not the way we need to move. And there was this clash, and particularly within feminism between these two women. And so there's a lesson there about white folks could invest in the work, but black people have to do the work. So I think that if we want to address political apathy, then we have to really think about how do we invest the resources to mobilize communities to really move forward. I saw Candace.
Yeah. Do you see any generational differences within the black community as far as what's the transition in Northeast Tennessee? What's it of how they feel about political involvement?
So nationally, yes, there are generational differences. You might see a situation where there are, I'll say the grandparents. The grandparents actually saw the civil rights movement, worked and strived to enter into the middle class. And now there are some studies where the children of those individuals might have carried on. Now those individuals have had children, and in each generation you're wanting to see better, And there are some studies that are showing that the children of this current generation are actually scaling back. And Malcolm would argue that there's this sense of being Americanized. And so the culture is being reflected. This current generation is probably the most diverse of any generation prior. But in terms of really understanding struggle, quote unquote, and the need to persevere, that's nationally noticed. I can't really talk so much about the local level. I would contend that the local level is a microcosm of the national. That there is a population of younger black people, this is the last thing they want to talk about. I know it firsthand when I was at Langston Centre. This is the last thing that people really want to deal with. And why should I have to deal with it? And then we saw 2020 happen. And then people got slapped very, very hard. And people now are trying to make sense of it. And you can sense the anger, the vitriol from young black populations, because if you think about it in a metaphorical sense, just the night prior, you could party together, you could socialize, let's say, together, and then the very next day, a man's dead. You're trying to make sense of things, and it seems like now some people are taking their sides. They're engaging in their fortifications. And now, all of a sudden, I'm black. You like my music, you like my swag, you like my attitude. Now here we are in this kind of fortified state. And folks were trying to make sense of it. And for them, it was, I lash out. So, you drop the F-bomb, you say it loudly. And some of us might remember in 2020, for about 5 hours on Walnut Street, there was a standoff with some young people. And they didn't really understand the idea of movement and strategy. But I know for a fact that they had the attention of leadership. So that's something. Man in the back.
Okay. It's not so much about politics, but the podcast Community History 365 is specifically addresses some of the leading black people that we had in Johnson City specifically, historically. There's one about Ezekiel Hagel, the famous doctor. There's another about Mildred Ellis, who was this amazing musicologist from Johnson City that nobody's heard about. It's buried over here in West Lawn Cemetery. It's some really good episodes if you want to learn some about some of the black leaders that Johnson City produced.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you for mentioning that. Yes. Community History 365. You can go to iTunes or Spotify to find it, and hope that you would enjoy it. I thank you for sharing that.
Would we, more specifically I, be welcome to audit your class?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You'd be more than welcome to audit the class. We have I have some groupies that come and to our class. But yes, would love it. I will be teaching this fall, and so yes, political science 4030, Black American political thought. Yes, would love it. Yes, ma'am.
What is your opinion on what would make that unexpected pendulum swing the other way?
So when you talk about race and American political development, there's this notion called racial orders. And so when we talk about racial orders, we're talking about laws, Supreme Court cases, executive orders and such. And so if you are Dr. Derek Bell, Dr. Bell is no longer with us, but he is one of the originators of what we heard, critical race theory. Dr. Derek Bell is going to say that there is this notion called black realism. And he said that he was a black realist. And so under black realism, there is this admission that the country is fundamentally racist and that this pendulum will shift from time to time. And there will be these periods. And it's just something that black people in the country have to get used to, is that there will be a season where the laws will reflect, and we can cite that throughout history, but the laws and the cultural zeitgeist will be in favor of black people, but it will shift. And if you are someone like a W.E.B. Du Bois, you're trying to figure out the why. And Dr. Du Bois, when in 1903, writing The Souls of Black Folk, he thought that, well, if we could get the most intelligent black people together with the most intelligent white people, it's all of that intelligence, people will look beyond race. And we lived off of that theory of the talented tenth for most of the 20th century. And Dr. Du Bois, in the 1930s, realized that that's not working. And then he will begin to look at other theories, and again, I label theories, so I'll let you make the decision, but he reaches a point where he begins to debate. There's another guiding force in the country. And there's this thing called capitalism. And Dr. Du Bois makes a conclusion that it's capitalism that actually fuels the attitude, because somebody has to be the worker, somebody has to be the producer. And so when you look at American history or American society purely from an economic label or economic perspective, if we needed workers to make the colonies strong, we found a workforce in Africa. And so Dr. Du Bois will then make that conclusion and then proceed from there. And so there's this idea of racial orders, that there are laws, edicts, court cases, that as the pendulum will shift back and forth, it will reflect the time. And so if you think about, again, the 1960s and the past 60 years, the pendulum has been more progressive. And then you think about legislation that may range from 3 strikes and you're out, 3 strikes legislation. And then most recently the anti-DEI efforts, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. You're beginning to see where these racial orders are swinging back in another direction. Well, everybody, thank you so much.